Hello and welcome back to another ProGuides video. 2 more days until rank! But hold your horses, before you practice the same comp over and over again, be sure to watch this video to learn about the new buffs and nerfs coming in patch 9.23. Depending on how large the balance is, it can really make or break your comp. Everything we're about to mention in today's video has either been confirmed by Riot Mort or is currently live in the PBE settings. Although there may be slight differences once it goes live, this should give you a good expectation for what's about to come on Wednesday. Before we begin, remember to click our link below in our description to see more in-depth guides, builds, and ways to win you your next games. There are many courses designed by pro players within the top 1% of the game to teach you the meta and how to effectively climb up the ladder. So if you want to get to the top 4 of your games, then go to ProGuides.com today and we will see you there. Alright, let's jump back into the video with the Synergies buff. So far confirmed by Riot Mort's tweet, Ocean and Warden will be receiving a buff. We're surprised to see Ocean getting a buff. Although as a standalone synergy, they can be considered weak, they work as great pairs with mages and summoners. This could be a buff in order to lower the advantage of a poison comp against a mage comp, making it even more so of a soft counter. For now, Ocean Synergy went from a 10, 20, 40 mana gain to 15, 35, 60 mana gain. This is a very significant amount, which can potentially make Ocean mages one of the strongest compositions in the meta. On the other hand, we also have Warden receiving a buff, which we agree it could use. Yes, double Thornmail and Warmog's Braum is strong and fun, but it's also very memey and a lot harder to achieve. In PBE right now, the buff affected Warden on their tier 1 and tier 2. With 2 Wardens, you gain from 125% more armor to 150%. With 4 Wardens, it went from 275% to 300%. There has been no changes to 6 Wardens. 6 Wardens is a viable build, even though it's not that popular, so we're glad to see that there was no significant buffs to that. Last thing we want is people forcing 6 major tanks at you every game. On the other hand, buffing the armor by 25% for tier 1 and tier 2 makes them a lot more appealing to include in some of your comps to make your overall team tankier. Although a bit better, Desert will still act as a pretty hard counter to this synergy with their 50% or 90% armor reduction. Now, moving on to the incoming Synergies nerfs. The first one is Glacial, which we believe this nerf is targeted more specifically towards Olaf. Olaf has already been a terrifying beast that has the potential to 1 versus 6 as he constantly stuns others while being immune to CC. 2 Glacials didn't take a hit, but 4 Glacials went from 40% to 35%, and 6 Glacials went from 60% to 50%. 6 Glacials may not be as worth it to go for anymore, but we feel that the 4 Glacials and 6 Berserkers build took a larger hit. We'll mention it again later, but Olaf by himself will also be receiving a nerf, making it a double hit on one of the best carries in the game. As for our second synergy nerf, it's Shadow. 4 Shadow has been an easy synergy to throw into many compositions. Shadow Mages, Shadow Summoner, Shadow Berserkers, and the list goes on. This makes it a pretty competed synergy overall and one of many people's favorites. In PBE, instead of doing 50 and 100% increased damage, it will now deal 45% and 85%. It's a fairly decent nerf that should limit the amount of compositions that Shadow will excel in, but still enough for them to still shine in a few specific comps. Alright, enough about synergies though, let's jump into our champion buffs. Skarner, Ashe, and Taric will all be receiving a buff. This honestly scares us a little bit. The Crystal buff is honestly very strong. Having only a maximum amount of damage that they can take makes them great tanks and potentially for Ashe to be a great carry. They haven't been entirely popular in the meta though because the units have been very lackluster. Skarner is a mediocre tank compared to other units. Ashe received a significant nerf after PBE was over, making her too pricey and weaker than other rangers, and Taric's ultimate took too long to go off. So this buff was definitely needed as the units were all weak. Thus, pay close attention to how much they buff them when the patch comes out. So far, we noticed a slightly higher physical damage from Ashe, but didn't see anything notable in PBE for Skarner and Taric. Crystal will definitely be viable in the meta after this patch, but the question is, will it become the new OP synergy where everyone tries to include them in their team? On to the next champion, we have Taliyah, someone who we feel desperately needs a buff. In a mage build, she is arguably the weakest unit. She does make up for it because she procs the mountain buff with Malphite, which makes her crucial in a mountain ocean mage composition. However, so far on PBE, we've only really noticed health buffs, but we will see if she ends up doing more damage once leveled up. Moving on, we have Thresh. Thresh's shield is pretty clutch already at times, but he tends to fall fairly quickly in the mid to late game. In PBE right now, his buff has been pretty insane. His shield amount has jumped from 200, 300, and 400 to 250, 400, and 600. Along with the Warden buff, he'll be a great unit to throw into tank and also protect your carries. And lastly, in our champions buffs, we have Ezreal. Ezreal gets a huge power spike, going from 200, 400, 600 damage and applying on hit effects to dealing 200, 600, 700, 800 damage. He was always extremely underwhelming compared to the other rare unit Kindred, but expect this to change significantly now, bringing Rangers back into most compositions. This is probably the biggest buff in PBE right now, with others receiving only a buff or a nerf of 100 damage at most, while Ezreal is getting 3 times the amount. We also have a list of champions that got a slight buff at level 3. These buffs are not confirmed, but it's what we notice in PBE. We expect them to go live too, as they are all minor and only affects the unit if you tier 3 them. To list them out quickly, Aatrox's ability at level 3 went from 750 to 1000. Jax's ability at level 3 also jumped from 350 to 450. Kindred at level 3 also gained 50 additional ability damage. LeBlanc deals 100 extra ability damage at level 3. Nautilus deals 100 extra ability damage at level 3. Nico does 200 more ability damage at level 3. Sion gained 200 more ability damage at level 3. Ornn increases critical chance from 20% to 50%. Syndra gained 75 damage at level 3. And Volibear gained 250 ability damage at level 3. So enough about how great some of these units will become, it's time to talk about the champions' nerfs. Ivern and Maokai are the first ones of this list to take a hit. Woodland and Druid have just been too strong in the early game. Riot has been wanting to avoid compositions that just dominates a single game. Starting with Ivern, his shield has been decreased from 200, 400, 600 to 200, 350, and 500. On the other hand, Maokai now heals 25 less at tier 2 and 50 less at 3. No changes at tier 1, but Woodlands don't really get a power spike until they get tier 2 or 3 anyways. We expect this nerf to make them less of an easy win streak that stays prevalent in mid-game, but still be great starters for your early game. As Woodland will still grant you an extra unit, this is very powerful at levels 3 through 5. Next up is Vladimir. He's actually one of the strongest tanks due to his lifesteal ability. With the right items, he will normally be very hard to kill. His ability took a slight nerf, losing 25 damage at tier 2 and 50 damage at tier 3. We actually feel that he doesn't need a nerf, since Ocean Mages normally lack a tank. The main issue was that there was a bug where Grievous Wounds did not affect Vladimir. This has also been addressed, which we feel would already balance the champion a lot more. Anyways though, even though he is dealing less damage, with the Ocean buff, we still expect him to be a great addition in a Mages build. Speaking of a good champion being nerfed, there's also Malzahar who got a change. Although we couldn't find any significant changes in PBE, we do feel that a nerf for him is very necessary. For a 2-cost unit, he's simply too strong and able to carry even in the late game. High expectations on what his nerfs will be. He is one of our favorite units, so we hope he doesn't become too weak in the new meta since Shadow is already getting nerfed. Are you surprised that we haven't said any light nerfs yet? Fear not. The best champion did take a hit, which is Yorick. The only change in PBE so far is that the minion's health has decreased from 750, 1250, 1750 to 500, 1000, 1400. So they will die off quicker and hopefully be enough to stop the insanity of hyper-rolling lights. However, we still expect this composition to still be one of the best ones, and the nerfs did not affect the extra healing and attack speed that light units get. And now to our favorite poison champion, Singed, who also took quite a nerf. His health is a little less, and his ability damage also went from 250, 500, 2000 to 200, 400, and 2000. So an enemy tier 2 Singed should be less detrimental to your team now. And as mentioned before, Olaf will be receiving a nerf. Although we didn't find any significant changes in PBE, we are expecting his survivability to take a hit. The Glacial nerf was already pretty decent to stop him from stunning as often, and making 6 Glacial builds less viable, but the champion itself could be less tanky. Now to talk about the nerfs that haven't been officially announced, but is on PBE. Each of Diana's orbs will go from 80, 100, 120 damage to 65, 85, 105. Nasus loses 50 health at tier 3, which goes down to 550. Vayne's ability damage went up from 8, 12, 16% of target's max health as true damage to 9%, 12%, 15%. Yasuo went from attacking targets from 3, 5, 7 times to 4, 5, 6 times. As shown here, light overall might be weaker, as 3-tiering your Nasus and Vayne was always a requirement in a lights build. So after synergies and champions, we now have item changes, all which would be an item nerf. The one that everyone anticipated just because of how much it got spammed is Iceborne Gauntlet. Instead of reducing attack speed by 35%, it now got nerfed to 20%. It'll still be spammed in a cloud map, but at least it won't be as insane as before. Guardian Angel also took a hit, decreasing from 500 health to 400 health when the wearer revives. Guardian Angel has always been good, but we haven't really seen it OP in the meta, so we're surprised to see this nerf. Lastly on the items list is Ionic Spark, which went 100 damage to 90. Ionic Spark are a pretty hard counter to mages, so this slight nerf is a balance to still give mages a chance. And now to talk about bug fixes. Woodland will no longer spawn an extra unit on board when you only have 2, Vladimir will be affected by grievous wounds, and Zyra's plants will no longer end up on your bench randomly. Seems there's also some bug fixes on Veigar and Ashe as well. Thanks so much for watching today's video. Also, shout out to you guys and a few viewers who helped us gather all the changes in PBE. Since these changes are just what is shown in PBE, keep in mind that it might be slightly different when the official patch notes get released in 2 days. So let us know how you guys feel about the upcoming changes in the comments below. And as always, like and subscribe, and we will see you all next time.